even within those organizations, you'll see many of the researchers, technologists, or business people will be saying behind the scenes, like we still working with Ethereum, Ethereum is the ecosystem that we're choosing, and we're launching L1 because of this or this or this.
They are now surpassing the Ethereum Foundation in their ETH holdings. So I'm curious, how do you see the Ethereum Foundation evolving?
Is it better that they are able to have such a strong amount of supply of these networks to dictate governance processes or changes, or at least have a say? Welcome back to the Rollup. We are your hosts. I'm Andy.
I'm Robbie, and this is your home to learn from the biggest guests, the brightest minds at the tip of innovation.
Our goal is to help spread the collective knowledge of everyone in our community.
We are breaking crypto out of its echo chamber and taking it to the real world.
All right, Tomasz, welcome on. You're the first part of the based Rollup day that we're hosting today. It's the day before the day, so you're a whole 24 hours early. Good to see you, man.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you.
You're like the new George Washington of Ethereum. They brought you in, start fresh. People were ready for a change in leadership. People wanted to see a new Ethereum come out. Might I remind everyone who's watching that 6 months ago, Ethereum had scalability issues. The L2s weren't going to work. They were parasitic. The L1 was never going to scale. And this was not going to be picked up as an institutional asset because it was only Bitcoin as a special snowflake. The community was fractured and people were leaving for Solana. 6 months fast forward today, institutional adoption, DATs, base rollups are getting traction. Still a lot of the inherent, I think, issues that people argue about in the tech, but the roadmap is shipping, and there's a lot of work to go on the L1. It's just crazy how fast some of these sentiment and things change. Tomasz, how has the last 6-ish months for you been as the co-executive director of the Ethereum Foundation? And maybe just describe how this personal sentiment shift has been from your perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very long honeymoon period so far. It's been great. I think that very often I'm just the face of changes because of appearing on podcasts and communicating much more, but the changes had been happening before I joined. They have been happening in the shadows, in the background, like people in stealth mode build Ethereum together all around the world. And I think the first few weeks when I was joining and I was reaching out to people and asking for feedback, and many of them were saying, we're starting something big. We cannot allow this moment of crisis feel like it's a real thing, and they'll start contributing. And now you see the effects of that. Like many, you mentioned digital asset treasury companies, you mentioned some of the protocol work, all of that has been started sometime before I even joined, and some of it was EF leadership helping to coordinate, and that leadership change was just part of it. So I hope this also makes people just feel very, very confident that Ethereum generally has so many leaders, some of them stealth mode, some of them very visible, some of them communicating, some of them just quietly building code, and that's all that matters. Sentiment shift in media. So maybe here communication is very important, like just coming and clarifying things, not allowing other people to fill in the gaps and saying that that's what's happening, but explaining clearly what's happening, what we were working on, how we're working on it, what are our plans, strategy. And even if you shifted slightly, if you make changes, over time, people start to feel it, how you communicate and where you have more or less confidence. I think we generally have a lot of confidence now because we're just catching up with the communication on the things that maybe were not communicated that clearly in the past, but were relatively clear. There's still some areas where we're exploring the technology side of how to solve some challenges, how to answer to the new challenges. But the team is strong. At the foundation, also the engineers, researchers, and business builders in the Ethereum ecosystem are super strong. So yeah, great few months. Some highlights. I've been traveling a lot and visiting communities everywhere, and I think there is a lot of excitement. There was excitement at 10 years of Ethereum and for the next 10 years too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you came from a very critical role in Ethereum. You were founder of Nethermind, one of Ethereum's clients. And so I'm curious, as you built up that company and it was very integral to Ethereum, you also had surrounded yourself with very technical talent in Ethereum, and you were very deep in the scalability roadmap and working at some of the deepest parts. And so now Ethereum has grown into so much beyond its technical capacity. There's not just developers and builders, there's founders, and now there's these DAT companies and Tom Lee and Joe, like all of these things that are now surrounding Ethereum. So I'm curious, how has your perspective changed? What was the lens that you viewed Ethereum through, and how has that changed up to your current role of executive director?
Sure. When I go back to when Ethereum was starting, and I was not during that time with Ethereum, like the first 1, 2, or 3 years, I feel that what was extremely important is that you had people there that were connected to institutions. You had people that were committed to the research against all the rushing. And there were people that were deeply technical and engineering focused. And all of that together created all components of the Ethereum success. And probably without any of those components, they wouldn't have the success of the early days, of the early years. When I was joining in 2017, the ecosystem, starting Nethermind, I've already seen many of the announcements of the, at the time, very, very dynamic Ethereum Enterprise Alliance that was announcing one by one large institutions saying, we're going to build on Ethereum. And now, many years forward, many of those institutions that were announcing that time are very active, or maybe sometimes they just built something, tried, they disappeared, and then coming back, disappeared again. And here's 2025, and it's really year of institutional adoption, and you see the same names actually learn so much. And my journey with Nethermind was, yeah, very much more on the engineering side. I worked as an engineer before that as well, with financial institutions, with large institutions like Citibank, and then with a hedge fund, 𝗀𝗂𝗧 Capital, where practically, even as you're an engineer, that team is probably like, at that time, it was 50 to 100 people. So it means that you're a bit closer to all the events and you're observing what happens. But still, I agree, like Nethermind had this very, very engineering focus of how to build the client performance optimization. I think in 2019 or so, we were leading that push for performance matters, right? Like you have to really think as well that the clients can contribute to the improved performance, that engineering excellence will matter. And that's something also, like the fact that I was building the code base myself at the time for a few years. I was really a coder, often like core developer, coder. I participated in those processes. That helps to understand now the challenges when scaling, helps to appreciate the effort of all the client teams, also the limitations and the worries. But also it means that you can be a bit more brave in making some claims about what is possible and push people a bit more towards the limits. Obviously, you always risk that your core devs will be overloaded, feeling burned. That would be crazy. That would be really bad. But you also understand that sometimes it's that motivation that we're going to the exciting times, that it all matters, actually prevents the burnout. When people see that everything is going well, that you're participating in something great, that you're among the elite of engineers building a lit project that matters, then it really drives you. And I think that helps. And then talking about it also is a pleasure.
And have you seen examples of that inside the Ethereum community and the Ethereum Foundation so far, with Robinhood coming on chain? These companies, crypto companies going public, like there is adoption. It is a lit protocol. Like these things are happening. It must be very gratifying internally, and also, everyone in the community feels it. Have you seen those examples inside as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, core developers are not disconnected from sometimes they are disconnected from the news, and that's great. Sometimes they just feel the moods, and everyone in the community will notice, okay, there are big announcements, There are changes in the US market. There is a bit more openness from regulators. There is equities trading on chain. And I think that you'll see more announcements this month. I think Ondo is preparing something. I've heard something from Coinbase today as well. So you see more trading on chain and regulators being very friendly towards that. That is bringing that feeling that you actually have an impact. At the same time, it brings a few questions about, do you continue working towards all the values related to retail users? Will you continue providing privacy and censorship resistance? People start asking about capture, about maybe leaning towards one part of the world too much. So we pay attention. We are excited, but also always cautious. We owe that to protocol, to provide security, to provide all the attention to what matters, why people are building long term, why people are not leaving to shiny new things that appear for a year or two. And we've seen many examples of the chains that just have this like super momentum for a year or two. You feel like they kill everything. And we went from the ups and downs of Ethereum, and people know that there is something deeper there, why they're building, why the community stays, why do people in stealth mode, why they're there. Because you can always judge the size of the community of those who claim everything is going well, but it's a bit harder to judge how many people are there that will appear in the time of crisis. And Ethereum has extreme power of attracting those people that don't care about visible things, politics, and just appear when needed. And that's what makes the chain continue going.
Introducing Extended exclusively on Starknet, a next-gen perps trading platform live today. With 50 plus trading pairs from crypto to TradFi, you get the best experience on chain today. Deposit in the community vault for attractive returns, EMV compatible, and engage in unified margin, spot trading, lending, and perps trading. Exclusively live at extended.app on Starknet today. Totally. Actually, Robbie asked this question to some institutional folks that we had on earlier today, which I think is also interesting for you. Kind of shifting gears away from the community, away from what makes Ethereum so incredibly powerful from a technology perspective, really the social layer, the social consensus. Some call it maximalism, others call it belief, some call it tribalism, others call it ideology and decentralization. Whatever you kind of want to label it, it's important to have people that care about, the core ethos of what we're doing here. And I actually even put out a recent tweet about crypto entering its practical era. And unfortunately, a lot of the practical decisions that are being made in the space are coming at choosing convenience, speed, or low cost over decentralization, kind of really still trying to figure out that triangle of kind of like core parts of blockchain in its trilemma. And so that being said, I think the best part about the Ethereum community in the lows, in the highs, is the steadfastness in the belief of censorship resistance, in permissionless nature, in decentralization, in low node requirements, these types of things. So that being said, we do have a very interesting paradox on our hands, which is companies like Bitmine and SharpLink. I think Tom Lee has gone out and said that he wants to buy at least 5% of the supply. I think SharpLink is looking to get 3%. And I think it's reasonable to say that at some point in the future, there could be a world where 10% or more of the Ethereum token supply, ETH supply, is in the hands of institutions. And the question today that I think Rob posed, and in my own words, was essentially like, how do you think about this? Like, how is it better that the institutional foothold with longer time horizons and a deeper understanding of what this technology is, is it better that they are able to have such a strong amount of supply of these networks to dictate governance processes or changes, or at least have a say? Or is there a point at which this poses a systemic risk to the Ethereum protocol, to the ETH, the asset, and Ethereum, the blockchain? How do you think about this now that Bitmine and SharpLink, I believe, have both recently passed the Ethereum Foundation in terms of total holdings, which I think is super bullish, but I think the trend is only accelerating in a snowball-like fashion?
Yeah, sure. So probably one aspect of it is general economic theory, where I would wouldn't claim that I can go extremely deep there. Sure, you think about what happens with capital over time, like you have institutions and people amassing capital, and how resilient this displacement of capital is over tens of years and so on. So does it really affect governance? Does it cause trouble? And I think separate. So this is separate from blockchains in general, from Ethereum. And when you ask about the digital asset treasury companies, they bring it, and you mentioned that as well, that institutions are appearing, they have a bit more practical focus. They'll maybe say that they don't think too much about the community aspect and the long-term values. You need both. So you need that pragmatist, practical approach to push for excellence in engineering, making sure that you can integrate all the institutional work, institutional flows. You need also the community and long-term vision. And I think we're doing great in combining the both. I love what happens around DETs and bringing a lot of education to financial markets. They ask about what Ethereum is. They start by seeing those new tickers, and then they ask questions. What is Ethereum? How is it governed? What really drives it? Why is it long-term? Why I can trust it? And even as you have this like constant chanting motivation about the Ethereum success, people like it as something that drives them, but it doesn't mean this is a capital market. People care about risk. So after hearing that, you feel encouraged to read more. And very often you have businesses that say, all right, this is possible allocation of capital for us, hold ETH, but what does it mean? What are the risks? And you have rating agencies coming to us and asking questions about how we can help them to understand the governance processes. There are people asking about security, and then suddenly for the Ethereum Foundation, it sets a lot of additional requirements of communicating clearly why everything is safe, why everything is permissionless, and that matters. I was many times I mentioned now that it's the institutions that start to be the drivers of our own values and come to us and say, show us the security, show us that censorship resistance, show us the privacy for the customers of the institutions. It's the regulators that start asking about the same things. So finally, we have people working together towards those goals. They start realizing, okay, in the end, this is that global neutral network that we are building together, and it's combining financial markets, it's combining regulators' efforts and the community. And now you mentioned if it's 5-10%, technically, well, this is not risk for governance. Sometimes, like the governance aspects, you have the social consensus, you have all the protocol parameters, and you have info where the capital and power is. And the whole design of the network is to really balance all of them together and to realize that even for the social consensus, that if some capture of the protocol would be possible just simply by capital, then it's still the capital will be really, really worried that that some totally sorry, I don't want to use bad words, but irresponsible action from the capital owners would put that capital at risk if they face the social consensus. It's a bit like a community revolt, right? That is possible. It's extremely unlikely that you ever enter into this dynamics. But because it's possible, it holds also some aspects of protocol beyond the technical aspects. We can do beyond the formalization of the protocol. It keeps everyone in check. So you have digital asset treasury companies that definitely are great for distribution of the knowledge, education about Ethereum. But they also should be scrutinized on all the risks underneath. There will be some of them that are probably extremely trusted by the people involved. Some other ones where people are coming with maybe either less experience or simply rushing that as an opportunity to make money, or simply trying to create a structure that wraps their holdings. And I think over time they will differ between each other, and there are definitely risks between them and among the digital asset treasuries. And all of that has to be scrutinized and verified for the risk. So some optimism, it's great it's happening, and also some warning signs here. And as a foundation, coordinators will just keep reminding people that there are risks there.
Yeah. And the Ethereum Foundation early on was a shepherd of the ideology. Like you said, you were almost front running the institutions. Now they're coming in and they're realizing what Ethereum is and what it could do. Regulators are coming in and they're asking these questions about decentralization, censorship resistant. And these were ideologies the Ethereum Foundation and the early innovators of Ethereum had in their mind, and they were the pilgrims that spread this to the rest of technology, finance, this industry as a whole. And so couple that with the institutions coming in, the regulators now taking notice, and the other fact Andy brought up in his previous question about now these institutions in terms of capital and weight with respect to the Ethereum network, they are now surpassing the Ethereum Foundation in their ETH holdings. So I'm curious, how do you see the Ethereum Foundation evolving as these other entities start to take a greater role in the network, and Ethereum Foundation seems to have a lesser role? How does this play out?
I don't think that Ethereum Foundation was ever using its ETH holdings as a way of promoting the values. We're using really the legitimacy of the researchers and thought leaders, and the money is there to spend on the operational expenses, to cover the team within the foundation, to support institutions that have been spawned over the last years and needed some initial funding to become independent from the foundation. So that's where very often the funding was directed. So now when you look at the foundation's treasury, which would be probably around $1.1 billion, and you say that some of the digital asset treasury companies will be beyond that, like they are holders of more ETH, but neither we are using that for governance, nor them necessarily using that for governance. They have limitations, like they can stake obviously the ETH, but does it mean that they will have much more to say than the general protocol voting? But then it's, I'll call it 10%. It will not be 33%, and it will not be, even if it's 33%, it will be distributed among different holders, and then this is just capital, but there is still a very strong influence of the all-core devs, of the researchers, of those who believe in Ethereum values and just activate further influence because they are thought leaders. So all of that balances, and I don't think it's any shift in the foundation role just because its holdings are lower than holdings of others, because we're not using those holdings for governance. They're just like for paying the expenses. And also foundation doesn't really observe the central role. It hasn't had the central role. It has this role of filling in the gaps. It was less visible in the last years when maybe it was a bit risky to be too visible, but it's more visible now. But also because it understands that there's so many other organizations that are visible, so it's so clear that we are not central. That we're just like one of many institutions. Some of them are more business focused. We are more coordination focused and guidance and research. So that role maybe is. You will have maybe Gnosis, maybe Nomic, and a few other foundations that really work on zk research, and so like 0xSpark, and a few others, and they all serve that role, but maybe not in combination of like research and governance coordination. So foundation is sometimes unique, sometimes just one of many.
Yep. Yeah, and to your point, the foundation still has probably the largest base of intellectual capital focused on scaling Ethereum. And to that end, the Ethereum Foundation has outlined three focuses, really three priorities to really just continue to scale Ethereum to the extent that we all know it can achieve. And those three are scale the L1, scale L2s, and improve UX. This was part of a thought piece. I think Vitalik might have put it out. It was on the Ethereum Foundation blog, and it highlighted these three priorities. And so because we have this based rollup and native rollup live stream that's going to be continuing throughout the day. We're going to drop a market map. I'm curious, of those three, scaling the L1, scaling L2s, and improving UX, why are these the three most important priorities for the Ethereum protocol? And how do based rollups and native rollups help us achieve one or more of these areas of focus?
Sure. So we set those three priorities for 1 year, starting around April this year, which means that we are almost like halfway through. And really it spans over the two forks of, well, starting with 𝗵𝗵𝗃 in May, and then you have 𝗵𝗃, and then you have 𝗵𝗵𝗃. So it's like 2 or 3 forks together. 𝗵𝗵𝗃 may come slightly later. I don't know if it'll be March or June. These 3 priorities were selected based on the draw mood, feedback from the ecosystem, combination of knowledge of all core devs and researchers of what really matters and how you can create some synergies. And it doesn't mean that this is something that we'll continue talking about 2 years from now, or even like 1 year from now. We'll start talking about the next priorities based on the refresh of what's happening now. So this is more tactics behind the values of thinking always about the privacy, censorship resistance, security of the network. This is always there as the base. Then you have some, like, let's say 10-year strategy of where Ethereum, what big problems Ethereum is solving. And we started talking about it slightly during 10 years of Ethereum. And we, for now, we were a bit more quiet about it, not to distract people, but we talk about some big problems ahead of humanity and vision. And then you have maybe 3 years view, which is what we do for the next generation of protocol. And then you start talking about lean Ethereum and what Justin Drake is talking about, and look maybe more in if research topics. And then you see those like 1 year response to the problems now. And some of them are technical, and those are talking about how to make a credible commitment of scaling L1 for the L2s, how to scale L2s directly for the blobs, and how to solve all the questions around interop and UX. So really there is clarity that is a single ecosystem between the L2s and L1s, and whichever one you choose, you can connect and you can move the assets and you can move your deployments of applications pretty easily, and you can use the same tooling in many cases. Not always is like a perfectly comparable. Some of those chains on the L2 level will be EVM chains. Some of them will be non-EVM. Some will go just more standard rollup direction. The other ones will go with this base and native rollup. And you're asking me about base and native rollups. I think they add a lot of additional flavor and choices and options for some very important cases. Like nowadays, some of the institutions will come and ask, so if we are to launch an L2, which to choose, like which ecosystem to choose within the L2 space, how to do it. And with the base and native rollup, some of the solutions will be just much more no-brainer, easy to deploy. I'll be not focused on community and branding and innovation, like very often it is with the L2s, and that matters, and we benefit from that a lot. Like that distribution through a fashion of branding to the approach of community or maybe regional focus is what makes Ethereum unique nowadays. And with native rollups, you'll have this bland rollup, like very L1 aligned, that is just focused on, okay, just deploy a rollup. We need it for our internal processes, or we need to connect to the network, something that we already have that exists. And the institutions and independent operators, or maybe so people who will be operating agents in AI, will be able to choose which flavor works the best.
Yeah, and just one follow-up on this is we've seen some institutions like Stripe. They've went and they've launched an L1. Circle, they have said that they're going to launch an L1, and a lot of people on crypto Twitter have said that these guys in the long run are going to end up switching and being an Ethereum L2. So I'm curious, what's your pitch to these guys? Like, why should they be Ethereum L2s rather than be their own L1?
Yeah, sure. So You've seen recently some of the L1s transitioning to L2s on Ethereum. So you've seen Celo, and they now very clearly say they see better numbers, better adoption, better reaction of community, and that helps them to succeed. You've seen recently Ronin announcing that they'll be switching to the L2, and there is that question of this aspect of bidding for which ecosystem to belong to, which maybe is less of something that I would like to see. And then you have those L1s for payments for stablecoins that have been launching recently, and people would say they transition to L2, and I think that there is a bit of preference for, oh, we'll get the L1 premium, then maybe we'll launch something, and then there is always space to transition to L2. I think that we should maybe also start talking of this direct Ethereum ecosystem premium, like not going around and not losing those years of just being maybe like less openly adopted by everyone because you just keep claiming isolation from the ecosystem. They're not really isolated. Like they're launching and they say we'll be EVM, we'll be bridging to Ethereum, we'll remain very close to Ethereum ecosystem, and it happens. Like so. Even within those organizations, you'll see many of the researchers, technologists, or business people will be saying behind the scenes, like we still working with Ethereum, Ethereum is the ecosystem that we're choosing, and we're launching L1 because of this or this or this, which means that they feel it, that they feel there is a tension between those choices, that they might be putting something at risk, that they don't want to lose the community support, they don't want to lose that power of thought leadership that comes from Ethereum ecosystem saying they're one of us, right? Like so it's never like walking away entirely, and that's why we probably have that conviction that at some point they're switching to L2, and we maybe should start talking more and more often about why sometimes or very often this will be a mistake to not go directly in that path of just being very clear. We belong to Ethereum ecosystem. It's not only EVM, but it's also all of the values, global aspects, interoperability, that all of the effort and research improvements that will come from the not only from the foundation, but the entire ecosystem is something that will drive their technology forward. And if you go alone, that suddenly you realize that they launch the chain, and then another institution launches a chain, and then suddenly they start competing with this. If you're successful, then will be like 20 or 30 of those corporate chains, institutional chains, and those start doing the same that what we see everywhere else. Like you're launching the video streaming company, and then you start fighting for the exclusivities, for you blocking some content. And at some point, people say, oh, maybe I just go back to piracy like 10 years later because the entire market gets disrupted. You have some great UX very often, and some market is covered. But then you start competing regionally. And I think that might be the case here as well. So choosing Ethereum, I think you go to this global platform immediately. So that's where the conviction comes from. Sometimes this will be reasonable business strategy for some more regional or niche market. Sometimes it'll be great for some period of time, but it will not have the same guarantees of never disruption. It's about also like launching a major investment bank nowadays and saying that you don't go with digital assets, you don't go with blockchain, you just build a traditional system as well. That's much more extreme case, and maybe it's not a good analogy. But you always can get some temporary premium, but you're not coming with the same guarantees of global neutral network.
Andy, I think you got your...
I think that's probably what a lot of the logic ended up coming down to be. Tomasz, thank you for kicking us off on the Based Rollup Day today. Hope you enjoy the map of the teams building in the Based ecosystem. I know we're kind of coming low on time here, but yeah, any closing thoughts for the teams who are building Based rollups for Ethereum?
I think that there's support for Based rollups. Like there's coordination around it. There is lots of excitement. I think that when you think about Based rollups, 1 year ago, it was like in the middle of creating all the new directions and innovation in the base rollups. And then maybe in the last months, on one side, there is continued coordination. Some teams are already deploying lots of those novelties, but also maybe you've heard in some areas, you've heard less about base rollups. I think this should not be discouraging. There's lots of support for that. It's part of the strategy longer term, and it'll be probably extremely relevant for many of the institutions. So there'll be market for base rollups, for native rollups for sure, and even as we talk about the broader ecosystem, L2s, that shouldn't be discouraging. That's just that we see all of these flavors of Ethereum very relevant in many different aspects, and they'll find their own users, their own deployments, and their own revenue models.
Awesome. Tomasz, thanks so much. You speak of the gravity of Ethereum. Ultimately, it is this black hole, this sink for intellectual capital, social capital, financial capital. All of it is coming to Ethereum, and you are its shepherd and its steward. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much once again for inviting me. It was great to be on the podcast.